So, hi everyone. I would really like to thank everyone for joining in. This is the fourth Product 360 event. The topic is about product development and hiring for product managers in a tech startup. Welcome to today's event, which is sponsored by Orpheum. This is an event series that aims at bringing together all the knowledge from product, UX, teams, design, data science, engineering under the same roof and share experiences and best practices for global product leaders. So I will do a brief overview of what we're currently doing and our plans for the future. So the Product 360 team will be basically organizing some mini conferences and webinars every month. That's the plan, especially starting from 2022. And the idea is to have global leaders in product design, data and engineering, and presenting their experiences, best practices, lessons learned, and perhaps actual case studies. We can also start by thanking our sponsor, Orpheum, and our supporter, the product community, Greece. We are really happy to have these organizations supporting us. And I would also encourage you to basically go to our LinkedIn page and to our meetup group. Subscribe there so you can get all the updates and all the next events that we will be having in the next months. Before we start, I would also encourage you to use Slido. Slido is an audience interactive and engagement app. Some of you might have used it in the past, but if you haven't, it's quite simple. All you have to do is type slide.do. You will be basically seeing a screen that you can also input your event code. Our event code for today is 501345, and you will be seeing the let's say the questions that we will be talking about, and obviously you're more than welcome to add yours. So we're excited to have today Nikos Kariotoglou, the CEO and co-founder at Seervision, a Zurich-based tech startup that uses AI to automate high-quality video production. Nikos is the CEO and one of the co-founders of Seervision. He has also received his PhD in the area of robotics and control from ETH Zurich in 2015, and officially started working at Seervision a few months after that. As a last-minute surprise and addition, I would say, Nikos invited Orestis Varesis from his team, where they will be also sharing and exchanging insights, mostly on the hiring challenges. Orestis has been a product manager at Seervision for the past 3 years. His focus is on driving the product strategy and ensuring that Seervision's product development remains focused on the needs of their users. If I'm not mistaken, Orestis has been part of the Seervision team since 2017. But the fun fact is that basically he joined as a robotics engineering intern and transitioned into a product manager. That would be a really interesting conversation to have later on. In our fourth event, basically what we will be discussing in today's webinar, Nikos will share the view of a first-time founder when it comes to building and nurturing a product mindset in a technology-first company. Using stories from before the time we even knew what project management was, all the way to today, where Nikos can comprehend life without a dedicated product team. In the process, he will be also sharing his limited but valuable experience of hiring for product managers and building product managers from within the organization, leading to the realization that in the role of a PM, technology companies often need mini ninjas with a very rare set of skills. So without further ado, I would suggest Nikos taking the stage and sharing some information about Seervision before we start, so you can all have a better idea of what the company has achieved up until this point. Nico?
Thank you, Saki, very much. Hope everything works. You can see me, you can hear me, all good. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I think this is quite exciting to as you said, put all these different viewpoints on how we develop products at companies under the same roof. So I find this quite interesting, and it's something, as you said, that for us was a learning curve. We did not even realize that this was the case in the beginning. And I'm really happy that Orestis is here with us today, because Orestis is actually, his path is super interesting. We've been together now for many years. We are friends and colleagues for the past almost 4 years, I'd say. He did his master thesis at ETH at the lab where I was working at, and then he joined us as an intern. Then he became a full-time robotics engineer, and today he's our best PM, actually. So it's a very interesting trajectory, and I think everything I can say he has experienced too. So we will be able to somehow, spar with each other along the way. So that could be interesting. Seervision is not the company that people know. It's actually just now starting a presence in Greece. We have an office now in Athens, and we are building a team there. And as such, I should say a couple of words, of course, about it. It's when we talk about video production, people think different things. And for me, the easiest way to describe it is if you think of a spectrum of video production, from our regular TV shows, where you have big studios and there's a presenter and always wearing a suit and everything looks super professional and nice, all the way to doing things kind of in the virtual event space now with YouTubers and kind of guerrilla productions, as people call them. In this spectrum, everything happens. And when people say video production, they really cover the whole thing. And what we do at Seervision is basically creating software that allows you to automate how cameras behave across the spectrum. And we started with cameras, but actually we have now started focusing on everything around a production. So not just what the camera will do, but also how would you combine together cameras with slides or with other kinds of elements that you want to present in order to make it easy. So on the high end, on TV studios, we remove the need for people. With intelligent cameras and automation, you don't need anymore the studios to be so difficult to manage. And that, of course, is a valuable proposition for big studios and corporations that have them, and not just broadcasters. And on the other side of the spectrum, we enable people who want to communicate online more often, and this is now exploding for obvious reasons, to do it better. So you can build nowadays a very small setup, which can provide 70–80% of what a TV studio can do with very little upfront investment. And with Seervision software, you can actually operate it. So in a nutshell, in this spectrum, we are helping everybody kind of do it the same way. So we call it democratization of video production. And our expertise is really in automation, AI, robotics. Both Orestis and I have studied the topic, but as the company grows, we have both transitioned in roles that have to do more about commercialization and positioning of what we do, because at the end, this is what makes companies successful. We are 35 people.
Nico,
go ahead.
Can you share some high-level information about, for example, how what customers do you have? If you can tell more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's across the spectrum I described before. Yeah. So I give you a couple. So one of our customers is broadcast stations. We for example, today we closed the deal, or yesterday I think we got confirmation for a deal of the Estonian TV using one of our solutions in their studio. So really studios across the spectrum. And we also have corporate clients like DeepMind, which is okay. I'm not supposed to use this for promotion, so it's not like that. I'm just saying that they have their own studios in-house where they're doing their internal events of different forms. So from town halls to research discussions that they're having, or even in other cases, product launches and stuff. This is the kind of events that people capture with our system. So broadcasting, corporations such as big tech. And then we also have some, for example, in the US, houses of worship, where they, this is like small churches where they do their ceremonies online. We also have a couple of those. And yeah, this is really, in a nutshell, the kind of clients that you will see using Seervision.
Also to chip in on that, one field that we saw quite a lot of boost the past few years is education. I mean, they were forced. I mean, maybe on the bigger universities they were already doing online lectures and so on, but many universities they were forced to rethink completely their model. So we got quite a lot of inbound leads for education-based use cases, and we also have quite some good customers. One is basically a university for the Ministry of Sports here in Switzerland, and they have our solution deployed in 6 rooms, I think.
Interesting. So, how many people are in the company? How many are in Greece? As you mentioned that you're starting an office here.
Yeah, we just started. So we are 35 people, and we have 2 in Greece now. So this is really recent. But also the way that we build up this second office is with a concept called nearshoring, which is not one where you create separate pieces of work and then you have teams spread around the world that do it. But we have key positions that are taken care of by the people that we build in this office in Athens. So we have our automation team lead is in Athens, Panos, who just joined. Nick is working on computer vision. So these are key people, and they're going to be working on all areas of the company. So in many ways, we look at it as a different office that could be one city next to Zurich, where we are, but it's actually in Athens. So it's the same principle, and we want to spend time together, both sides. So the Swiss team, the Swiss office spending time in the Greek office, the Greek office spending time in the Swiss office. That's the principle of nearshoring, at least.
Great. So I think we could move on to starting the actual conversation, to the juicy part. So my idea was to start off by talking about the challenges and how a technical CEO, as you are, Nico, understands the whole product cycle, how important it is for a technical CEO to be close to the product, understand how it works, and basically your lessons learned, especially in the early stage where you have to do everything.
It's what you said at the beginning when introducing Seervision. I mean, for us, as I said, this has been a very interesting learning curve, and I think being technical in a technical startup is a very difficult challenge if you are early on in the company. It's not a challenge just for the co-founders, I think, but it's a challenge for anybody who is in the company, because you tend to have a very clear feeling or opinion about some things, especially on development. You think you can estimate it yourself. Often you have opinions about UX topics that I didn't even know what it meant, to be honest, when we started the company. And we would be making decisions like, why is that button not there? Or why is that thing circle and not square? And we would just make these decisions without any principle at all as to how they should be made. And I think this is often a big challenge. So I think to the first point, what the involvement of co-founders, founders of a company, especially mine, also in product, at the beginning it's too much. At least for us, it was really we strongly influenced what the product does, and looking back, as I said, we didn't have the right fundamentals to do that. So I think this is something that we would do differently for sure, to make sure that you don't have these biases. I think this is something key that we have understood over time, that building a product right means a lot to manage your biases. And I think this is a challenge that when you start a company, you think you know this, but actually it's, at the end of the day, the principle is the user, the market will tell you what needs to be done. And Yeah, I think this involvement is too much at the beginning, and for us now, I'd say, at least for me, and Oresti, you can also chip in about yours, but for me now it's a little bit too little, because what happens after the company grows a bit, you have different stakeholders, and they expect you to know everything about the product. So we have this, for example, you have board members that want to know specific things about the product, and they expect that a technical founder is very close to the product. But once you build a team that has product managers and they do a lot of the work about the product strategy and getting the insights, you tend to be a little bit further. So today, I'd say I am not involved enough. So that's one of the things that we are working on, to make sure that we are involved, especially not just me, all the co-founders, because we are the champions of product at other levels of the company, either at the management team or towards the board, the investors. Imagine raising a financing round and not knowing your product inside out, right? And this is what happens if you don't stay close. So yeah, I think from my side, at least, this is how it has been so far. Oresti, maybe your view?
Yeah, maybe I can give the opposite view. It was actually exactly as Nico said. In the beginning, it was all of the input, or the majority of the input, was coming from. I mean, Conrad, the other co-founder of the company, he has quite a lot of video production expertise from his other companies. So we were very lucky to get quite some interesting insights early on, right? And from the technical perspective, Nikos was also super involved. I still remember the first time that we coded together, actually. But it was super. They were super involved, and after a point, as Nico said, they had other stakeholders to work with. So it actually deeped quite a lot. And I think right now we are in, after how many years, right? We are in the process of reaching a stabler equilibrium, if I use technical words. And yeah, it's an ongoing thing, I have to say.
And what about the metrics you track in order to understand that the product development is on the right track?
I guess I can take that. So there are different kinds of ones, right? We can go from purely business ones, revenue metrics, which are always a good or bad indicator of how things are going, but it's in the end, it's a bit of a lagging indicator. So we do have some revenue metrics. We can get we have customer management systems that can give us all these metrics. So revenue wise, we capture some parts. Then we have usage metrics, and here is where I would like to give the biggest emphasis. Actually, in the beginning, you or at least from my perspective, I wanted to measure whatever I could, or everything, if possible, everything. But as soon as you go in, you realize that you can measure almost nothing, right? So what we started with was actually the principle of North Star metric, which is if you can measure only one thing, what would this thing be in order to define your what is the only thing that you can measure defining your organization? And for us, it's because we are talking about tracking automation and usage of our system, and that while we are in a growth path, this is what makes sense. We are actually measuring, for example, active minutes of usage per month or per week, and that's something that that was the first effort that we did in order to capture insights from our system. And slowly we built upon that. And currently we are gathering quite a lot of analytics. We had to go through some legal process as well with all the regulations, but we are in the process of gathering analytics about specific features, about the usage, and aggregating those. For example, we use Mixpanel for aggregating the insights. So we have revenue, we have usage. Development ones, we have specific development metrics, because our whole development team is agile based, so we can also measure points that they tackle per sprint, how many, what's the average task duration time, and so on. So yeah, and then on the UX side, we are actually starting right now to make it more concrete. And what we saw that it works is the HEART framework from Google.
Maybe if I can add something to this, Saki, from my perspective, at least sometimes we have something that we started quite early for the size of company we are, and I think it was a good decision. We have a customer success engineer who consistently reaches out to our customers and has discussions about how they feel about the product and all that. And he does that through a group, so everybody in the company has access to this information and his conversations with our customers. And then in general, we do this. We are very open because this kind of information, the more you know across the company, the more connected you are, so the better it is. But for me, one thing I'm looking at always is the excitement, the response of the customers in those conversations. And this is nice because we share it with the team also. If you don't want to be involved in the group, you get it as a espresso, we call it customer espresso every week, where you can see what is going on. And from these discussions and the summary that Laurent, our customer success manager, puts there, you have a feeling, are things working? Are people happy? Do they face issues? And for me, this snapshot, let's say, makes me gauge very well. As it's a soft metric, but it tells me, okay, things are moving well or things are blocked, and that's what I use then when I talk to the rest of the team.
Yeah, sometimes qualitative metrics are also important, and not just quantitative. Any lessons learned on how to manage the engineering team? Any challenges that you had while at the same time, you were building the team? Because as a founder, you have a lot of challenges, developing a product, but at the same time, hiring people, scaling the company.
I think the one that comes to mind, and this is a topic, by the way, just to say this up front, this is a topic we discuss all the time. It's always in the top of our mind. We always try to improve it. It's never perfect. So for me, it's a dynamic system, almost, this relationship. Multiple times we've talked about product development. How can we make this as frictionless as possible? Because there's always this idea that who sets the roadmap, who executes the roadmap, this kind of stuff. And at the beginning, we didn't even know the difference between these things. And that already was interesting because we didn't know the different roles that have to, or the different perspectives that you need to have on things. I mean, when you start having regular releases of software, when you start developing with agile methodologies, everything changes. Then suddenly all this fits in a framework that you either buy into or you don't. And I think this is something that is a big learning for me, that once you start structuring these things, then you need to adapt a framework, and you need to adapt it the way it's meant to be adapted. Because if you forget to put one role somewhere, if you don't have a tech lead, because somebody will figure it out, I mean, it's not going to work. If you say my PM is going to also be my tech lead, then you need to subscribe to this fully and understand what it means, and then not just kind of do these different roles. And that's a learning that if we went back, definitely we would have tried to make very concrete. If there are roles that we want to put together, because you have to do this as a startup, we still do the work for these roles, and we don't forget to separate what they mean. So that's definitely one. And I think the other big learning, at least from my perspective, is the I remember there are two stages. I would call it, two stages of how the company evolved. In the beginning, there was no separation. The product team and the engineering team were a group of, when you're 7 people, 8 people, it's, of course, we're all in one room. So there's no discussion about roadmap, and it's just everybody does what's there to be done. Like and we create a presentation once in a while because somebody asks us to, and then we sit together and we have to come up with something beyond 3 months. So we do it. That was how we did it back then. And once we created this, okay, we have an engineering team, we have a product team, we need to have, we also, a big learning, we hired a guy who came in, experienced, and he came in to fix sort of our development methodology. We were very cowboy engineering at the time, cowboy software development. So we got this guy who was supposed to fix everything. Reminds me of this movie, Idiocracy, if you know it, where they have this guy who's supposed to fix everything. And this guy, when he came in, he had very solid principles, but it was very difficult for a young team that knew how to work a certain way to buy into those very quickly and adapt to them. So there we quickly had a difficulty between, this is what you need to do, this is the recipe, but we didn't want to exactly buy into everything. And there we lost some time. So we would definitely have done this differently. And that's the stage where
we
changed a lot.
A different cultural approach, would you say, or it was just, you know, the recipes that the expert, the consultant that you brought in were
actually hired,
working?
Yeah, we actually hired the guy full time. It was not that he came in to tell us what to do. He was part of the team. I think the issue is that, as I said, for a small team, you don't separate some things. You don't say, look, this is what we need to do, and you don't need to know why you were doing it, because that's going to come from some prioritization that happens in another room by somebody else. And if you don't have this well-structured and clear, and everybody has their chance to be involved in the place where they want to be involved in, and you suddenly you don't have anymore that strong of a connection to why we're doing something, why this and not that, and then you don't spend the time to communicate this properly to the team, that transition is very tricky. So if we put somebody into a situation that there is an engineering team and there's a product team and everybody understands this and subscribes to this, which is what we have now at Seervision, nobody questions this stuff. It's very easy to come up and say how things work, and then it kind of works, the machine works. But the moment you set it up in the beginning and people start having to split these roles that they had at the beginning, that's where it's very tricky, because that guy expected that people would understand, but people do not. People join startups because they want to. Engineers that could work at any company for twice the salary join a startup because they want to be involved in the why, they want to be involved in the prioritization, they want to be involved in these areas. And once you take that away from them, it becomes very challenging. I think Orestis, tell me if that makes sense to you, because I remember that time, and you also were an engineer at the time. So
yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Maybe the learning that I would say is that if you want to change something radical, and that was at this point for us, the changes proposed were very, very radical, right? The communication part makes or breaks the whole thing, right? I really believe that the points were at this point, even at this point that we were very true and very well structured, but trusting the process in for something completely radical at that point was not ideal for us. So the communication made quite a lot of difference, I think, in this scenario.
Interesting. When it comes to communication, there can be a lot of challenges, and a lot of things might be considered as as I have already explained this part, or we have already discussed about this process. But at the end of the day, perhaps someone was not paying attention, someone was not, seriously considering this as the right way, because he has a different opinion about the process and how to solve it. Anyways, challenges. Before moving on to the next part of our discussion, is there anything else you would like to add here? Nico, Orestis?
Maybe, yeah, just from my side, one thing I would like to add is that, and I also see a question in the chat by Mara on can the
product manager be a CTO? Should the product manager have technical knowledge of one of the product, example, studies and or development experience in the technical field of the product.
Yeah, so if I roll it back, because that's kind of a nice exercise to do now and then. This is almost a necessity when you start the company, and if it's a technical company, a product company, then somebody is doing the product manager's work, whether they know it or not. Is different, and for some reason when we start, and I find this interesting actually in retrospect, when we start companies, we always start with, okay, who's the CEO, who's the CTO, who's the sales guy, you know, this kind of approach. Although the work, if you're really honest with what you do at the beginning of a company, you do product manager's work. Every time I read about it, and that's why we call it also internally kind of the ninjas. You have to really think of everything, positioning, pricing, everything. And this is what founders do. So to answer the question, necessarily at the beginning, somebody who is a CTO is going to do the work of a product manager. And the second, at least in my opinion, and the second part of the question, at least for example for Seervision, we had our supposedly CTO was doing also product manager's work. The second part, this is, in my opinion, trickier, because when you read up on different skills of product managers, then you see that they are also often strong at different things. So having technical knowledge of the product, on the one hand, can be a blessing because it allows you to be a little bit closer to what it means to do some things. At the same time, it brings biases. And that's one thing that, as we said earlier, I think, at least from our perspective, is a very strong trait for PMs, to be objective, to not have these strong biases. So if you're some sort of AI trained person, and then your product has anything related to AI in it, it's very difficult to get away from that and think of product metrics and how are we successful, and not keep going back to your technical experience. So yeah, that's my
maybe also to give my view, because I was in a technical role, or at least for a very short amount of time until I went to the product role, right? Bias is gonna be there in the beginning, and if I have to find to think of a learning for me is, or something very difficult for me in the beginning was to try and get out of this bias. I still do it many times in everyday life, because I have good technical knowledge of our system, right? But on the other hand, technical knowledge allows you to, and it also ties to the question about the engineering team, allows you to go closer to the engineering team and not just be the business guy, right? You part of the work is to be as close to the different stakeholders, and engineering team is one of these stakeholders. So technical knowledge helps way too much there, and also helps being able to filter out something. But the balance is quite difficult, I have to say.
Yeah, but who does this right is extremely valuable. It's an extremely valuable person. If you're able to do that, as Orestis said, you sit down with your developers and you have to talk about something as a PM, and this happens often. It's the best way to estimate something and understand better what is required for something to be done. If you don't have technical background, it's very easy to be useless in this discussion. And so, yeah, this definitely can be a benefit. I agree. We saw that in our team, at least.
Well, I think we've answered that question, but there are also two more questions on Slido, and there's also Manolis Kokolakis who has raised a hand. So I think it would be best to allow Manolis to ask the question, or make a comment, since he raised his hand, and then we can see. It seems that he hasn't raised the hand. So I think we can go and answer the questions on Slido. So one of them says, is it better for a startup to have a senior or junior PM member if the startup has one member in the product team?
Okay, there I have a very strong opinion. we need fundamentals. So I think the necessity is that oftentimes you build these skills in a startup company, but if you are able to hire somebody or build your team around some principles, then a senior PM, as long as they are experienced in really first principles product management, not doing it in an established company where you have a very specific little role, that kind of seniority you don't want, because somebody who has just focused on one thing of PM work will find it very difficult to go in a startup where you have to do everything, as I said before, from pricing and positioning to I don't know, specific requests from clients and visits in their premises and all that. So for me, the answer is clear. It should be a senior one that has seen end-to-end product development, not just a specific area of it.
I agree on that. The second one is about what are the biggest problems when an engineer becomes a product manager. Engineers are often in love with technology and are not the best ambassadors for the users.
I think
Orestis,
that I think that
Orestis,
talks to
you
me,
should
yes.
take that.
Yeah. The thing is, I'm in love with technology, but if I talk just for me, I'm more in love with our users. So that was an easy choice for me. But the biggest problems, definitely what we discussed just before about the tech bias, is one important one. What was also a bit difficult for me was because apart from technical stakeholders, the development team, I also have to talk with quite a lot of other stakeholders, thinking business, marketing, external ones, partners, and so on. So having a way to finding the best way to navigating between all of those stakeholders and finding the balance, as I said before, was actually one of the biggest problems. And there, one thing that was helpful for me was there are quite a lot of courses that you can take, but in the end, reading quite a lot of books about the general principles, even if it seems silly in the beginning, it's actually quite helpful, and you learn quite some things about both about soft skills and about some frameworks that help you out in your everyday conversation.
Yes, I think that an engineer with good soft skills can become a great product manager. Let's go to the last question, and then we can move on to the hiring bit. So the next question is about prioritization. So how would a PM prioritize resources when he has two important things to do but can do them both?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? It's it happens. It's one of the most common ones. There is no there's no single answer, right? There is no right answer. It's and again, you will hear about so many different ways to prioritize, like so many frameworks. But in the end, it's you have to figure out how to get a bit of an estimate of what the business value or the actual value of what this thing is doing versus what is the effort. That's for me. That's what helps out in the end, right? And the value you can get it with quite so many different ways. For us, the one big thing that helped us quite a lot was getting the raw insights from customers, and these and also having a quite close relationship with our customers from early on. As Nico said, we have the customer success manager, and many times we go together to installations with customers, to productions with customers, to get these raw insights and talk about the value of things.
Yes, being close to the customers always helps. We don't have to listen to them all the time. They're not always right, but most of the time you can basically understand their behavior and where they see value, and basically put your most resources on the thing that matters the most. We will answer the other questions later on. So I would suggest moving to the hiring part. So Nikos mentioned that you're also involved in the hiring process. So would you like to discuss about how you handle this process? So how do you hire? What things you're looking into? How do you identify the red flags, perhaps?
Yeah, that's actually Nikos, please stop me if I'm saying something wrong here. That's something
we are doing it now, right now.
We are doing it right now, exactly.
Yeah, very relevant right now.
Yeah, so there are quite some things, and for me, it's also a new field, right? So I also have to learn how to do it. Maybe we definitely check about structured and analytical way of thinking. That's actually one of the most important parts that we check for. Soft skills and communication, as you said, is irrelevant if we are coming from a business background or if from a technical background, is quite important, and we are definitely checking for those, and we have quite an established process by now, hiring process by now, to be able to check all of those. Red flags. What are some red flags? Of course, yes, bad communication skills is a big red flag. Jumping to in terms of analytical skills, jumping to conclusions without being able to justify their way of thinking. That's also an important one. Yeah, the Nikos, you wanna chip in on that?
I think the for me what's very interesting in this is kind of the timing on when to actually do it, because I mean, how should I put it? The way it worked for us, at least, as time passes in the development of a young company, information is also, like, I'm talking about when to start hiring for the PM, like the first point. The information is very difficult to keep. So you have all these little discussions left and right. You try to understand whether your prototype makes sense. You talk to clients at the beginning, and this, you don't have a knowledge base at the beginning. Sorry, my daughter visited me here. And because it's so difficult to organize all this information at the beginning and it's lost, one would argue that having a PM early on in the team is a good decision. So for me, the way we would do it is either see that within the founding team of a company, these skills exist. So now that, if we were to start another company, we would know what to look for. So the skills that we are hiring for now, as Orestis said, we would try to see if we have them in the founding team. And if we don't, then we would either make sure this is one of the early hires, or we would make sure that the information that we have and we collect in the beginning is somehow captured and we can share it, because this is, for me, the most scary part now, that as Orestis said, there is also the technical, well, specifically in an industry that you're working in, there's a lot of information about the specific industry that is very difficult to pass to somebody. So that's something that I would take care of.
And what would you say about culture? So, especially when you're in a small group of people, in a startup where you are like 15, 20, 30 people, how important is culture at that point, and how you can be sure that the candidate is a good fit for that, for joining your group? Do you have any lessons learned? Like, have you hired the wrong person?
Well, absolutely, we've made mistakes there. I can speak of one, which is I guess a reasonable mistake, and I kind of tried to highlight earlier when saying about when the question was asked about senior or junior PM. I think it's very easy to make the mistake of thinking that if people have spent time in this role, that makes them senior. And we thought that people with experience have done this at different places would be able to do end-to-end product management. And that's not true. That's definitely one thing. And yeah, I think overall, at least for me, if I were to think of back culture is evolving in a company. So for us now, it's much easier to filter out for culture, because we have in the beginning, when you're a very small team, culture is very easy to be one thing, because people are very close to each other. They were put together by construction because they were similarly minded somehow. So it's very easy. Once you are a bigger team, then you have different culture elements that have to work together. And when you spend time to see what is actually the common ground, and you really spend time defining your culture, your values, all these things, then you have to use them when you evaluate people. And we do that now. We have actually in all our interviews, not just PM related, we have an element which is just the cultural fit. And there all the soft skills come into play. So it's not just communication, it's how you give feedback, it's how you work with other people. I think that's
how you communicate.
Well, for me, culture is really about how you behave with other people when you work together. Like this, this essentially is where we want to have a good culture in how we work together, because we spend so much time at work, right? So it has to be pleasant. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
So when is the right time to hire your first PM?
Yeah, for me, you either have it when you start the company, as I said, you either have the skill or you hire for it quickly. And if you cannot do that because of resources or whatnot, then you have to keep all the information that you're collecting somewhere. So as early as possible if you don't have the skills. But the most important thing is not so much the PM. For me, it's the information, that you don't spend 2 years at the beginning where a bunch of things are learned and then there are only 2-3 people that have them in their head and they're not able to transmit them. This is like, because at the beginning, maybe you cannot argue that your first hire is a PM. It may be difficult to find the money to do that. Maybe you need a developer and whatnot. So just make sure when you do that you collect the information, because when you hire a PM, having them relive everything that you lived the first year of your company, this is a big loss. And I see it now. I see things that we learned in the first years that are very difficult to transmit effectively to new people. So.
Yeah. So you would say that documentation is one of the things that a PM should be doing very well, right?
Especially of data, because that's something also we discuss with Orestis often. It's very easy. I mean, you see it because a PM will get inputs from different sources, and one of the sources is sales. So when sales people are having discussions, this is a gold mine often of information. But you need to get raw data. You don't want to get somebody's interpretation of this data. So documentation is tricky. Because sometimes people will just document what they think they heard, and you don't want that. You want what the other person actually said. And for us, I mean, we discussed with Orestis using transcriptions on Google Meet when sales team has meetings, so we can actually read and see what was said. And this to our product happens very many times. And I'm sure if anybody here works on anything related to AI, the perception of what AI does around the world is completely all over the place. So you will hear in a customer discussion some expectation about what AI should do, and then this will come into us as a feature request of some sorts. And this is where you realize that, oh, I want the data. I don't want the interpretation of something. So documentation, I don't know what the right word is for when you really write down everything. This is not, maybe documentation could also be the word. I don't know. Or is there a word for this? You know what I mean, right?
Yeah, not necessarily. I don't know. What I wanted also to mention here is that that's something that evolved for us quite a lot. As Nikos said, in the beginning, we were basically not only not documenting anything, but we were also not documenting the very important parts. And that's something that on the building a PM part that I was for good or bad I was involved in. It was actually a big learning that in order to be able to convince others, especially in a technology startup company, relying on data, not solely though, but being data informed and getting the insights from the customers, and not only using our guts to base our decisions is very, very important. So one thing that we did, apart from documenting our strategy or documenting our roadmap, is nurturing this culture of insights, whether it's from sales, it's from partners, it's from our own internal team, and that's also an important part, is to nurture this culture early on.
Great. We have some more questions, but I think it would be best if we go and answer the questions of the audience, because we're about to finish soon. So if you had to recommend some books about product management or for a product manager to read, what would these books be? Anything on top of your mind?
I think there is one book that every aspiring product manager should read, and that's Inspired by Marty Kagan. Yeah, and I actually have right here the next one, Empowered, that I still haven't read. I want to read it.
Great books, especially Empowered is for product leaders.
Yeah, I bought it, but I haven't read it yet. Some other ones, I have the product management playbook as well here. We actually both with Nikos, we read the No Rules from Netflix, but that's more on company culture. I would say, not so much about product management. Yeah, these are on top of my mind.
Great. Another question is PM versus PO. So product manager versus product owner. Is it the same? And if not, are both needed? At what stage of the company do you need a product manager? And when do you need a product owner?
That's a good one. That's one we discuss also often a lot. By the way, on books, the Crossing the Chasm, would you call it a product book as well? I don't know. I remember that there were some nice things
also
in
nice.
that one too.
It's also
Crossing
nice.
the Chasm. So PMPO. So I think, again, it depends on the stage. It's a luxury to say. I mean, everybody in an ideal world, you'll have a PM for every line of product that you make, and you would have a PO for every sub development team, and you would have every sub development team. But this is old style development. You also have principles. I want to say it's Git, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's Unity or some other forward-looking company that I think it's one graphics company that develops with all developers are shared. Then you have to kind of get them. That's the idea, that people in their organization.
Probably it's Intercom.
It's a graphics. It's not NVIDIA, but anyway, there are big organizations that are trying very different ways of doing it. A PO, at least the way we understand it at Seervision, is supposed to make sure that the prioritization and everything that has been agreed upon and set with the PM is executed correctly in the engineering team. So at least for us, so we combine tech lead with PO. That's how we do it. And at the beginning, you cannot afford to have multiple of these different hats. So I'd say, depending on the stage, this can be the same. But eventually, you want to have different people, because there are just so many things that a PM has to do, and the PO is also a lot of things that once work becomes a lot of work, then you really need somebody dedicated at it. I mean, Orestis, you have been
so
you have been balancing these two things now for months. So
yes, exactly. No, definitely. It doesn't make so much sense in the beginning when there are like 7 to 15 people. It doesn't make so much sense to split those because you need this close relationship with everybody. But what we saw is that as you grow, doing both things, working both on the inbound activities and the outbound activities, you do not do any of those correct, right? So there the split is necessary, and having a tech focused product owner also helps out. And I don't want to use the word unloading, but it's basically sharing the burden of the whole product, from the technical and from the more forward-looking direction of the strategy and so
on. So to take another question from Angelina, would you hire a PO who wants to take the next step to move into product management?
Okay, of course, it always depends what skill set they have, what skill set they want to build. There is a difference because a PO can be, at least in our company, a very inner-facing person who spends. I mean, it's always valuable to talk to clients and get the insights together with the PM. It makes the PO much more powerful, I think, in being able to also argue and convince and work with the development team to prioritize things within their sprints. So I think I would check, just to answer it very directly, I would check how good that person is in the soft skills of being a PM, the communication skills to the clients, being able to present things well to the team, because PMs also are evangelists of the product within the company. So if they sit up and do a presentation, it has to be engaging. People have to buy into what they're saying. So sometimes POs, at least from what we've seen, are a little bit inward facing. So that's the kind of skill set I would check. If they're able to empathize with the client's problems, be communicative, good at presenting stuff, then absolutely we would consider this, I think. Yeah.
Great. Extroversion is important. And last but not least, Manolis, who actually raised his hand, so I didn't, I got that wrong. He's asking, what's more important, a builder mentality or an eye for innovative ideas at the current stage?
That's a broad question. I take it at I take it at, again, it says at the current company stage. For us, for Seervision, okay, it's tricky because we also have, I think for many companies that work in fast evolving segments, and ours is one because of the virtual events exploding now around the world, an eye for innovative ideas, I would understand it also as being able to make the right bets, because you have always many options. In a tech startup, you could go and use your technology for many different reasons, different markets. So being able to make the right bet is definitely valuable. But we wouldn't have gotten to where we are now if our team didn't have this builder mentality. So we faced a lot of problems where we just had to put the leaves up and work and do something and fix things. And at that time, innovative ideas and ideas to work at different markets were distracting us. And that often happens from investors or investors mostly, where you talk to them about something and then they start saying, what if you could use the technology for random thing A or B or C? And they always have such ideas, but yeah, you have to balance. When you want to find more opportunities to enlarge your market, and innovative ideas are very important. So yeah, not the most direct answer, but kind of.
Yeah, the balance is quite important. And even if you are in a builder mentality, you always need to have a bit of a room for whether it's prototyping or whether it's looking around for not only from the product manager's perspective, but also from the technology perspective, looking around on what are the enablers that might make your product more effective, more lean, and so on. So it's a balance, depending on the stage, as Nikos said, depending on the stage of the company, you might tip from one side to the other, but they both need to exist.
Great. I think we've answered all the questions. I'd like to thank you once more for your time. Nikos and Orestis, I really enjoyed the conversation. If anyone wants to get in touch with Nikos and Orestis, I'm pretty sure you can reach out to them on LinkedIn, or you can, reach out to us, and we're more than happy to connect you. So I would like to close the webinar with, encouraging you once more to keep updated with all Product 360 community events by following our LinkedIn page and Meetup page. And at the end of the webinar, you will receive also a feedback form, and we're really looking forward to getting your feedback. Honest feedback, it's the most important thing. Thank you, guys. Have a great night.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Saki.
Saki. Bye, have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.